Bahrain's monarchy is under growing pressure as protests sweeping the Arab world reach this tiny Gulf country. Could the monarchy survive the ongoing unrest this time, and what does it all mean for the region? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Divya Gopalan. Events in Tunisia and Egypt have left Arab governments worried, and Bahrain's royal family is no exception. Days of protest came to a violent head on Thursday, and a police crackdown left several people dead and scores injured. As protesters mourn their losses on the street, can the rulers in Bahrain survive this uprising? Well, Zainab Walji has more.
A day of funerals after a night of violence. Thousands gather on the streets of the Bahraini capital to mourn the dead. In the early hours of Thursday, the police opened fire on protesters while they slept in one of Manama's main squares. The hospital, now a testament to the violent events of the night before. Patients with shot wounds to their bodies. Injuries caused by rubber-coated steel bullets, some even beaten with rifles. At least 4 people were killed. Yet despite these images, Bahrain's foreign minister insists they did not use weapons against protesters.
Bahrain's defense forces did not and has never directed a weapon. I will not accept any accusation that we directed our weapons on the people. This is the army of the country. It defends the people and the nation and condemns bloodshed in any circumstance.
While anger over economic issues and corruption has brought people to the streets in many capitals across the Arab world, the situation in Bahrain is unique. Since independence from British rule in 1971, tensions between the usually more affluent Sunni community and the Shia have often caused unrest on the tiny Gulf island. And the monarchy maintains this current uprising is no different.
We're being polarized. The society at that moment was being polarized. The country was walking on the brink of a sectarian abyss.
But for the protesters, this is not a sectarian issue. For them, this is about democracy, human rights, and representation.
The people in Bahrain are not demanding to change the government or to change the ruling family, but further reform and respect for human rights and freedom of expression, and to stop torture. And it is not like Egypt, they're trying to overthrow the government.
But with police brutality and people dead, the events of Thursday have changed the demand. It's no more about constitutional reform. For the protesters now, the only option is the removal of Bahrain's royal family. Zainab Walji, Inside Story.
For more on this, I'm joined by our 3 guests. From London, Saeed al-Shihabi of the Bahrain Freedom Movement. Al-Shihabi is one of the 25 terror suspects charged by the government last year. From Dubai, Ibrahim Khayat, director of the International Center for Strategic Analysis. And joining us on the phone from the Bahraini capital of Manama, Nabil Rajab, Vice President of the Bahrain Center for Human Rights. Now, I'd like to start with you, Nabil Rajab. You were speaking in our report there, and you said that people will be happy with a government change, not necessarily overthrowing the monarchy. Why do you feel that?
Well, first of all, I need to tell you, I just came out from burying the 4th death that we had yesterday. And I went to the Salmania hospital, and there are a few thousand people, doctors and nurses are protesting for not allowing the ambulance to go and carry the injured people yesterday. A lot of doctors came out from the Ministry of Health and nurses, and now there is another protest starting by the Bahraini journalists for not allowing them to cover the event in Bahrain as the international media are covering the event. Now, just remind me of your question one more time.
My question was, do you think the people will be satisfied with just an overthrow of the government, or do they want the monarchy out too?
Well, when they started in the 14th, people were in the street calling for a political reform. calling for a political participation, calling for a constitution that is written by the people, calling they were protesting anti-discrimination, anti-naturalization of foreign nationals, and anti-corruption. And but the government used force against them and used violence and killed many people and injured hundreds of people. Now people, yes, they were not calling to change the regime, but then later, because out of anger, people start calling to change the regime. They say, how come a ruling family, or how come a king that is ruling us, and he sent his troops, the troops which was brought from outside the country, the troops and special forces and special security and riot police brought from outside the country to raid our villages, to raid our cities, to raid our towns, and kill our people. Today the slogan, and yesterday, has changed from the government that we want to reform the government to that we want to change the regime now. Yes, but I said, I think if the ruling elite come out with an initiative where there is a real change, shows a credible one, a real change, and that could lower down the people in the street. But now people are calling to change the whole regime because of what is happening.
Okay, Saeed Al-Shihabi of the Bahrain Freedom Movement, if I could put this question to you, you're labeled as one of the terror suspects. Do you think that it would be enough for just an overhaul of the regime, or do you want everything changed, including the monarchy?
Well, first of all, I want to ask the world to decide who is the terrorist, myself and my colleagues who are languishing in jail, or the regime that has snatched the lives of many people from our country. There are still 50 people who disappeared yesterday, and nobody knows where they are. This is in addition to the 6 people who have been killed so far, at least 6 people, and the count is rising. So it is up to the world to decide who is the terrorist. This is one thing. And I believe that in a world that has come clear about its verdict in what we saw today in the newspapers, including the Times, the Independent, the Washington Post, the whole world of the free world has come out to condemn the regime. I think the game is over for the ruling family in Bahrain, because it has failed the test, not only to yesterday, it has failed the test last August, when it mercilessly tortured more than 400 people and is trying at the moment 25 of them for the past 4 months for sedition, for fabrication of news, for communicating with foreign bodies, and of course for terrorism. Now I think the issue of terrorism has been thrown back at the regime, and it is the one that is terrorism. You cannot cohabit with terrorists wherever they are. You can only habit with civilized people who uphold the rule of law, who give their population, their citizens, the right to self-destiny and to write their own constitution. This is not there in Bahrain, and I think the game is over for the ruling family. It has just to pack and go.
Ibrahim Khayat, do you think the game is over for the ruling family?
I don't think so. Basically, what's happening is we are judging based on the atrocities and the very harsh treatment conducted by the police in Bahrain, supported by the Saudi secret services or police, and probably many other countries in the region. What we have here is a typical failure of the political Arab system in all countries, in all parts of the world, like Africa, Latin America, Eastern Europe. We have seen regimes changing. What had happened in our region, basically, because of the war on terrorism, these regimes have been given a lifespan by the Americans to continue, because this is a strategy that was very oppressive. Regimes in the region are protected by the Americans in exchange for their services, their functionality in the internal world order, because of the oil, because of protecting Israel. So these are 2 main issues. And these regimes, they looked up to the foreign powers because they were backwarded, etc. They needed economic development, and also they needed protection. But during this economic development, what happened is that we have had a lot of failure on the social development, economic development, because of the political corruption, we ended up with these regimes not finding any way to communicate with their societies but through the security solution. The security solution is what we have seen in Tunisia. The regime had failed. In Egypt, the regime had failed. And now in Bahrain, it is normal for the regime to fight back using the atrocities because this is the only thing he has. And also at the same time, you cannot think what you cannot imagine. These people have never thought about ruling their society in a different manner or sharing power. This is for them is something they can accaparate, they can use sectarian reasons like in Bahrain or Islamic Brotherhood or terrorism, Islamic terrorism in Egypt, or the same also in Tunisia. Everyone is using a tool to convince the West that I'm the good servant, I'm the good, I have to play my role, allow me to abuse human rights so the elite in power will continue. And one of the problems also is that on the regional level, not only Americans and Europeans have been shocked by the wave of changes that are so quick. The GCC countries are feeling unable to answer this kind of challenge. They are afraid of having this contagious phenomenon reaching their own shores. They are trying to find a common response, like this is only a security issue. But on the long run, I think the ruling family, the main problem in the ruling family is not the king himself or the crown prince, whom it happens that I know personally, who is a kind and a good person. But the problem is, I believe, is with the Prime Minister, Sheikh Khalifa bin Isa, who has been there for more than 42 years in power. The king, personally, I think he doesn't even dare to challenge his authority sometimes. He has been there for a long time. His policies are questionable, especially on the sectarian level.
Okay.
Most of the oppression has come from his own inner circle of people, of the political corruption that surrounds his grasp of power. And I believe the Americans, when they are saying now, yes, do some change in Bahrain, they mean get rid of this problem and move on to something else.
Okay, Saeed Al-Shihabi, as we heard there, the problem was said to be the Prime Minister, not necessarily the ruling monarchy. Do you agree with that?
Well, this is our guest's personal view. I do not distinguish between the king, his son, or the Prime Minister. In fact, to me, the Prime Minister is probably less dangerous than the king. The king himself is the person who has ordered the people, his troops to storm the camp at Pearl Square. He himself and his son have advocated the use of violence. The king 2 days ago, 3 days ago, came out in his military suit and boasted of the power he has under his command. And it is difficult to suggest that it is only the Prime Minister, because I think they are working in collaboration. And if that is the case, then the king should come clean, apologize to the nation, order the arrest of the Prime Minister, not only for the crimes committed yesterday, but for the crimes committed over the past 40 years, including the dissolution of the parliament in 1975 and the repeal of the only legitimate constitution that has ever been approved in Bahrain, and order an investigation into the deaths or in custody or in the street, the extrajudicial killings and the torture that has been inflicted on the people. These are the least that could have happened. The king heard and listened the demands of the people more than a month ago, when they decided that, to dedicate the 14th of February to be the day of rage. Not a single step was taken apart from trying to buy off the families by suggesting to buy them for £1,600 each. And that is just a mean offer at a time of crisis.
Okay.
He showed that he wasn't aware of what's going on in the country, and he couldn't gauge the mood of the new generation that is being inspired by what is happening around them on regional and international levels.
Ibrahim Khayat, would you like to respond to that?
Basically, you know, what we're trying to do is we're trying to analyze in a methodological and analytical way. We're trying to guess what's really happening. We are both away, but based on the experience we've seen, the typical reaction that has happened in the inner circle of both Ben Ali and Mubarak during the first day of the revolt in these countries. In Bahrain, there is no revolt. It's a protest movement. It is a reformist movement that wants to share the power, that wants to bring its revendications into the inner circle of the ruling elite, not to throw it out yet. But basically, what had happened in Egypt and in Tunisia, the advisors have told, or the ministers have told the ruler in Egypt and Tunisia that no, these are small guys, we can manage them. They went to the solution they have learned that was efficient, which is the atrocities, oppression, and the security solution. 3, 4, 5 days after, things have started to change. International attention and pressure that is coming. Let's not forget that the game is not only in the hands of the king or his uncle, the prime minister, because now the Americans have in the waters of the Gulf, the region, 92 ships, which is the biggest armada ever in history and the biggest armada in the world. The Americans cannot allow this crisis to continue endlessly if the security solution is not going to succeed in 1 or 2 days. So what will happen is probably there will be a scapegoat. The main culprit will be probably the prime minister, and then they will make the changes to allow the country to survive politically and not to have to put in jeopardy the whole security and political situation in Bahrain, where the Americans are controlling the whole Gulf region and all their operations.
Okay, that is a very interesting point, and I want to put that to Nabil Rajab, who is in Manama. Tell us how much people expect the West to intervene, given that the West has influenced the way Bahrain has grown economically quite a bit. Do they expect the U.S. to weigh in?
Regarding your question, if we want the West to interfere, I think we are victim of being in an oil country. We are victim of being in a rich country. We are victim of being in a country that the West don't want to anger and don't want to make up. They don't want to make them upset. Yes, the West are influential. Yes, United States are influential. They could do the change. They could help. I'm asking the United States government to have a credible foreign policy as they act in Iranian protests, as they did with Iran regarding their protests. They should do with Bahrain. Bahrain people are killed in the streets. The regime itself, the regime itself getting empowered from outside. The regime itself calling the help from the Saudis and from the Emiratis and from the GCC country. Why don't we ask the others, the civilized world, those people who believe in the principle of values of democracy, of human rights, why they don't influence? They could influence if they want, but I don't think they want. Their interest is more important for them than pushing our government and pressurizing our government towards democratization and towards respect for human rights. United States is a big player in this country. If they want to do a change, if they want to do democracy in this country, if they want this country to respect the human rights, they could do it. It's very clear to everybody. But unfortunately, their double standard foreign policy, that is what is delaying the democracy in this country. United States today, if they really want to change, and in fact we are urging them, as a friend of our country, not to fight with our government, to pressure them, as a friend, to pressure our government to open with its own people, to have a dialogue with their own people, to respect the human rights, to stop discrimination, to stop corruption, to stop torture, to release our prisoners. The American and the the other Western countries, they can do it. And I hope they do it. But so far, we have been seeing only double standard foreign policy that they have towards our region. It's different than China or Iran or other country.
Right.
And the Gulf country is very special because it is an oil country. They want to guarantee the flow of the oil. We will guarantee the flow of the oil. We don't want to. This is not our problem. It's not the oil. They could have it all the time, but we can protect that, no problem. But we need democracy. We have the right to live in freedom. We have the right to live in democracy. Why the whole world has changed? Why the whole world becoming a democracy? Why not us? What is our problem that we cannot? We are a civilized society. We are an educated society ruled by a tribal mentality.
All right. I'm going to put this question to Ibrahim Khayat now. I saw you react there to what Nabil was saying. Tell us what you were thinking about that. Is it about oil? Is Bahrain capable, without the current regime, without the monarchy, of supplying what it needs to the West?
Look, what's happening now, which is very important, I would like to talk from a strategic level. Basically, after the fall of Egypt, For the last 30 years or 40 years, Egypt has been sidelined in the Arab world. This has allowed the Americans to establish a proper security system that was protecting the whole region, and also protecting the oil supplies, and also protecting the American support to Israel, which is important with the IPAC and all the other lobbying groups in the United States. So now with Egypt sidelined, Egypt doesn't have to contribute to be proactive in fighting Israel or fighting America. The fact that it has left this system in place, this apparatus. Now what we will have is the whole region where these countries have been protected by the Americans, and the fact that Egypt was there to protect is gone. Imagine how much time the Americans have spent and energy with the Israelis and the Europeans to fight Iran, which is similar in power and as a counterweight to Egypt. Now Egypt is gone, and Iran is there, and also Turkey is there and wants to play a role. So now what's happening, they won't allow to have one regime falling that easily. No one. Imagine when King Abdullah was calling Obama to talk about Mubarak, don't let him go humiliated, etc. I think the same will happen here. We should be practical and accept. But just one thing, last thing, is that now what Iran and Turkey are discussing, how to manage the changes in the region, not at the level of this protest, no. But when the regimes are going to change, they will be supporting the new ones, like the American support, let's say, some members of the Saudi family or others. Things will be changing in the 5-10 years. And now we should wait, because everybody is anxious. All the ruling elites are anxious. The Americans are anxious. Nobody wants to precipitate things. So probably they would like to stop the game, even the Iranians.
Saeed al-Shihabi, as we're hearing there are outside interests. So once you do oust this regime, if the protesters manage to, who do you expect to fill the vacuum? And what about interest from Iran nearby? How comfortable are you with that?
Well, Iran has always been used as an excuse for not helping the people of the region. If you are a Shia, then you are automatically considered to be an Iranian agent. And but we saw that in other places, the people will always have allegiance and loyalty to their land. And the people of Bahrain will weigh up their interests, and whether they lie in an alliance with Iran, good relationship with the United States. These are matters of national interest to everyone. And I don't think the Bahraini people are so stupid to give up their interests and sell themselves to anybody. And we know that the royal family in Bahrain has been having good relations with Iran. They have cultivated very good relations, to the extent that the Iranians are saying almost nothing about what's happening to the Shia in Bahrain today. Although I have to stress that the problem in Bahrain is not sectarian. It's not between the Shias and the Sunnis. It is between the people of Bahrain, the native people of Bahrain, both Shia and Sunni, and the royal family, which is neither Shia or Sunni. It is just a faction that has come from outside, occupied the land, and subjugated both Shia and Sunnis in the same way. So we are against dictatorship and oppression, rather than against people with certain ideology or sectarian affiliation. This is on one hand. On the other hand, I think the crisis in Bahrain now has shifted the discourse to UK and to the United States, because it is clear from the use of canisters, tear gas canisters, rubber bullets, that these weapons have been supplied to Bahrain by Britain, and that the Ministry of Defense is now reviewing its policies. Vince Cable is reviewing the licenses that were given to either companies or individuals to export these weapons, which should have been used in different ways. It was amazing to see tanks and armored vehicles moving along the motorway, the highway there in Bahrain, to frighten off not enemies of the state, not enemies of the country, but people protesting and demanding their rights.
Right.
You cannot use such weapons against for internal repression. This is according to international conventions and regulations. However, they are being used
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there.
Bahrain.
We're running out of time in this program. This certainly has been a very interesting discussion. I'd like to thank my guests in London, Saeed Al-Shihabi from Dubai, Ibrahim Khayat, and in Manama, Nabil Rajab. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We, of course, welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Goodbye for now.